Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961, a Boeing 767-200 was hijacked on 23 November 1996. En route from Addis Ababa to Nairobi on an Addis Ababa-Nairobi-Brazzaville-Lagos-Abidjan service, by 3 Ethiopians seeking asylum in Australia. The plane crash-landed in the Indian Ocean near Grande Comore, Comoros Islands. Due to fuel exhaustion, 125 of the 175 passengers and crew on board died, along with the hijackers. The official accident report stated that of the survivors, 4 were uninjured and the remainder sustained injuries. The incident is one of the few documented water landing attempts of a wide-body airliner with survivors. Until the 11th of September 2001 attacks, it was the deadliest hijacking involving a single aircraft, and the second deadliest hijacking after the 1990 Guangzhou Baiyun airport collisions. Aircraft. The aircraft involved in the accident was a Boeing 767-260, registration ETAIZ, N23916, that had its maiden flight on 17 September 1987. Powered by 2 Pratt & Whitney JT9D7R4E engines, it was delivered new to Ethiopian Airlines on the 22nd of October 1987, except for a short period between May 1991 and February 1992 when it was leased to Air Tanzania. The airplane spent its life in the Ethiopian Airlines fleet. It was 9 years old at the time the incident took place. Captain Lul Abate, an experienced pilot with over 11,500 total flight hours, was the pilot in command. The first officer on the flight was Jonas Mercuria. He had flown more than 6,500 hours. The flight had been delayed in order to allow a connecting flight to feed passengers. The aircraft took off at 8:09 UTC. Description: hijack at about 8:29 UTC, when the aircraft, referred to as Zulu by Ethiopian Airlines pilots, after the last letter of its registration, was still flying over Ethiopian airspace. 3 Ethiopian men charged the cockpit and hijacked the aircraft after taking an axe and a fire extinguisher from the cockpit. According to a special airdisaster.com report, one of the men ran down the aisle toward the cockpit, shouting statements that could not be understood, and his 2 accomplices followed soon after. The Air Disaster report described the men as young, inexperienced, psychologically fragile, and intoxicated. Ethiopian state-operated radio later identified the hijackers as 2 unemployed high school graduates and a nurse. Their names were Elmayehu Bakali Balena, Matthias Solomon Bile, and Sultan Ali Hussein. The men threatened to blow the plane up in flight if the pilots did not obey their demands. The hijackers said that there were 11 of them when in fact there were only 3. After forcing Jonas into the cabin, they made an announcement over the intercom. They declared in Amharic, French and English that if anyone tried to interfere, they had a bomb and they would use it to blow up the plane. Authorities later determined that the purported bomb was actually a covered bottle of liquor. The hijackers demanded the plane be flown to Australia. Lul tried to explain they had only taken on the fuel needed for the scheduled flight and thus could not even make a quarter of the journey. But the hijackers did not believe him. They had been reading the Selamtar in-flight magazine stating that the maximum flying time of the airplane was 11 hours. Instead of flying towards Australia, the captain followed the African coastline. The hijackers noticed that land was still visible and forced the pilot to steer east. Lul secretly headed for the Comoro Islands, which lie midway between Madagascar and the African mainland. Crash-landing the plane was nearly out of fuel as it approached the island group, but the hijackers continued to ignore the captain's warnings. Out of options, Lul began to circle the area, hoping to land the plane at the Comoros main airport. This forced Lul to land at more than 175 knots. Lul tried to make an emergency landing at Prince Said Ibrahim International Airport on Grande Comore, but a fight with the hijackers at the last minute caused him to lose his visual point of reference, leaving him unable to locate the airport. While still fighting with the hijackers, he tried to ditch the aircraft in shallow waters 500 yards off Lugalawa Beach Hotel, near Mitsamali at the northern end of Grande Comore Island. Lul attempted to land parallel with the waves instead of against the waves in an effort to smooth the landing. Seconds prior to contacting the water, the aircraft was banked left some 10 degrees. The left engine and wingtip struck the water first. The engine acted as a scoop and struck a coral reef, slowing that side of the aircraft quickly and causing the Boeing 767 to suddenly tilt left. The rest of the aircraft then entered the water unevenly, causing it to break apart. Except for the rear part of the airframe, the broken portions of the fuselage sank rapidly. Island residents and tourists, including a group of scuba divers and some French doctors on vacation, came to the aid of crash survivors. Many passengers died because they inflated their life jackets in the cabin, causing them to be trapped inside by the rising water. This led to future notices about not inflating the vests before exiting the plane. A tourist recorded a video of ETAIZ crashing. She said that she had begun taping because she initially believed that the 767 formed a part of an airshow for tourists. Medical treatment and repatriation of bodies. Survivors were initially taken to Mitsamali Hospital. The crash site was less than 2 kilometers away from this hospital. The passengers were transferred to El Maruf Regional Hospital Center in Moroni the same day. The 2 French who survived and 19 injured were transported to RE Acute Union. In RE Acute Union, one of the injured died, making the death toll 125. Excluding those transported to RE Acute Union, survivors were transported to Nairobi in South Africa. At the time there was no mortuary in Moroni, so cold rooms were used to store 124 bodies. Investigation. On 3 December 1996, the Direction Générale de l'Aviation Civile des Comores of the Comoros agreed to delegate the investigation of ET 961 to the Ethiopian Civil Aviation Authority. The Air Accidents Investigation Branch analyzed the flight recorders, fate of the passengers and crew. The final accident report includes a listing of surviving and deceased passengers and crew. All 12 crew members were Ethiopians. 6 survived, including the pilot and co-pilot, and 6 died. The passengers originated from 36 countries. List of passengers, not including crew members, including hijackers. The deceased passenger count includes the 3 hijackers. Of the passengers, 42 originated in Bombay, including 3 Americans, 9 Nigerians, 9 Sri Lankans, 19 Indians. The rest of the passengers originated in Addis Ababa. Of the 175 passengers and crew members, 125 were killed, including the 3 hijackers. According to the accident report, all 6 surviving crew members and 38 passengers received serious injuries, 2 passengers received minor injuries, and 4 passengers received no injuries. 1 passenger, an Ethiopian, was identified as a child on the manifest. This passenger was among the dead. Many of the passengers who died survived the initial crash, but they had disregarded or did not hear Lul's warning not to inflate their life jackets inside the aircraft, causing them to be pushed against the ceiling of the fuselage by the inflated life jackets when water flooded in. Unable to escape, they drowned. An estimated 60 to 80 passengers, strapped to their seats, presumably drowned. Lul and Jonas both survived. For his actions, Lul was awarded the Flight Safety Foundation Professionalism in Flight Safety Award. Notable passengers among those killed was Mohammed Amin, a wartime photojournalist and publisher of Selimtar, Ethiopian Airlines in-flight magazine. He was believed to be standing near the entrance to the cockpit arguing and negotiating with the hijacker, presumed to be guarding the cockpit during the final moments of the flight. Brian Tetley, Amin's colleague, also died. CIA officer Leslie Ann Shedd, who was posted to Ethiopia, died in the crash. At the CIA's 2012 annual memorial ceremony to honor fallen colleagues, the agency recalled survivors of the crash, telling the CIA that Leslie Ann spent her final moments comforting those around her. Franklin Huddle, the U.S. Consul General of Bombay at the time, and his wife Chania Pom Huddle both survived the crash. Huddle said that he chose to fly on Ethiopian Airlines while planning a safari trip to Kenya because of the airline's reputation. Huddle said in an interview that Ethiopian Airlines was one of two in Africa to have Federal Aviation Administration certification. Huddle wanted a flight during the day, reasoning that flying during the day was safer. Huddle credited his and his wife's survival to a last-minute upgrade to business class. Other passengers who perished on the aircraft included Lt. Gen. Antelanis, the Hungarian ambassador to Kenya, and a French Foreign Ministry official. Maps. Aftermath. A memorial service was held in Galawa on 30 November 1996. The incident has become a well-known hijacking because of the videotape. This was one of very few large airliner water landings, and was the first hijacked water landing. Both the captain and first officer of the flight received aviation awards, and both continued to fly for Ethiopian Airlines. In the media, the crash was featured in 3 episodes of Mayday. The first appearance was in Season 1 to explain what might have happened if Air Transat Flight 236 had ditched instead of landing in a nearby airport. In Season 3, an episode covered the events of Flight 961 in detail. Most recently, it featured in the Season 10 episode covering U.S. Airways Flight 1549, to explain the risks of that crew's decision to ditch in the Hudson River. It was also featured in a 2010 episode of the biography channel series One Survived, in which a survivor told his story of what happened on the plane.